Okay. Welcome everybody to our fourth and final educative seminar for the 2026 Australian Economics Olympiad. Your host, myself, is Justin Verley, a high school economics teacher from Brisbane State High in Brisbane, Queensland. Thank you for joining us. Very excited for our guest today. We have Dr. Whyte, the senior research fellow and director of the Industry Engagement and the Australian Research Council Centre for Behavioural Insights for Technology Adoption. Apologies if I didn't get that exactly
No, it's
correct.
a mouthful, isn't it? It's a lot of, yeah. It's just go with the
Yep.
acronyms usually.
Perfect. BITA, and the School of Economics and Finance right here in sunny Queensland, Brisbane, Queensland University of Technology. His research focuses on his research focus explores large scale decision making, and his work takes a multidisciplinary approach in studying key sex differences in human behavior in cyber settings, with work that bridges the fields of applied behavioral economics, personality and social psychology, and evolutionary biology. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. It really does mean a lot to us, and I'm sure the students are going to get a lot of value from your presentation.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Wonderful. For the students in the room, I suppose, and for anybody who may be watching YouTube down the track, this one is going to be a little bit different. Stephen has been gracious enough to offer a bit of a presentation, and so he'll be leading the charge for the first 10 or 15 minutes or so, kind of going into the work that a behavioral economist does, and all of those sorts of things, which I think will be a little bit of a change of pace. I'll still be here to sort of ask some questions afterwards and things like that. And as well, if anybody does have any questions, either for Stephen or for me or anyone involved in the Olympiad, because we do have our round one test, feel free to type them in the chat at any point. And then we can go through them and we'll have a chance to discuss them afterwards. Now, Stephen, a bit of a heads up as far as our target audience with this. These are all going to be mostly year 12, year 11, maybe some year 10 high school students from around the country. They are most likely going to be quite strong academic students. They obviously are quite keen in economics, so much so that they have signed up to and paid for the chance to enter this competition, where the first round is a 2 hour exam on a
Oh,
Saturday. so,
yeah,
so they are quite good students and they're
yeah,
very in economics. I say all of this to say there likely is no need to really baby them. They
yeah, absolutely.
uh, Feedback from students have said that they are very much keen on the nitty gritty of what economists do
Hmm.
and the more thought provoking, I suppose,
Okay.
problems and context and things like that. So no
Yeah,
need to oversimplify things for them. They're right. They'll be able to follow right with you.
excellent. I'll assume a PhD level of understanding then.
Wonderful. Okay, so without further ado, I might let you just take over, Stephen.
Excellent. Thanks, Justin. Excuse me, as Justin explained, Steve Whyte, I'm a behavioral or applied economist at Queensland University of Technology, and I'm currently employed by the Australian Research Council's Centre for Behavioural Insights for Technology Adoption, which is a federally funded 5 year, $17 million research group that focuses specifically on training the next generation of PhD students in behavioural insights and applied economics. I completed my PhD in 2018, and my undergraduate and my master's all at QUT. And I'm a Brisbane boy, born and bred. I went to Padua College out on the north side of Brisbane, old brown and gold. So if you know Brisbane, yeah, I think it's a wonderful city. And QUT, as do all of the universities in Southeast Queensland, I work uh, in research with people at all of the institutions in Queensland and a lot of the GO8s. That's how I came to be part of this event, working with Gigi Foster at UNSW. There's some great behavioral scientists and applied economists across all institutions. So I think the number one thing to know is not necessarily what you want to do at university, but you know you want to go to university. So I think that's the most important thing. And good on you for giving up your Saturday night to come and listen to me. So let me share some slides with you. Uh, sure.
It's good on my end. We can see your screen. At least
Yeah,
I
you can see
can.
them? Okay, cool. So you got my landing slide?
We are, but we can. It looks like we can see your whole desktop.
All
Only the
right.
one window, but we
Okay,
can see it.
let's try this again. Um,
There we go. Now we can only see. Yeah, we're limited to just the PowerPoint
okay,
window.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So there's the beta symbol, there's QT, and there's my details, my email, and there's a QR code at the end if you'd like to learn a bit more about me. What I'm going to run through today is really quickly what is behavioral economics, and particularly the space I work in, which is known as a credence good. I remember doing 11 and 12 econ at high school, and they didn't bring up credence work or things in relation to the basics around sort of Veblen goods. But I'll run quickly through that. I'm going to do a little bit on bias and on why human decision making is so important in the context of economics, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about applied economics and what it is. So I think there's a real misconception when people say economics and economists. What do economists do? And usually when I ask my first year students, and I've taught first year economics at university for since 2012, and I've taught probably more than 10,000 undergraduates or lectured to more than 10,000 undergraduates. And I think the big misconception is that economics is the study of the economy, and it's not. Economics is the study of decision making under constraint. And these core principles of things like opportunity cost and scarcity, they get lost a little bit because when we just had the budget come out a couple of days ago, and all we hear is about the economics of decision making, but it gets lost on us that what economists are is more important than what economists do. What economists do is the really important thing. And if you can study human behavior with a toolkit of theory and methods, then you can work in any space. And this is, Justin was talking with me before we started. Big questions come from year 10 and 11 and 12 when I talk to them, and even first and second year undergraduates. What will I do as an economist? Well, I would say you could do anything. You can work in any space because everybody needs to understand how we make choices. I think the big misconception comes from economics in relation to how it's used from a policy sense, and that essentially, and again, this isn't a novice audience. With the recent budget, we've seen changes in capital gains tax and negative gearing. Governments are interested in resource redistribution or welfare transfers, rent seeking. So when governments want to change behavior, they tend to either use incentives. They give you handouts, rebates for solar roofing, the baby bonus, which was the Howard Costello government in the late 90s and the early 2000s, which was crazy. Why should we pay people to have sex and reproduce? We've been doing that for 80 millennia. We don't need to give people money to do it. But you see business are very smart at it as well, building social collectives for things like flybelows and rewards programs and frequent flyer miles. So incentivizing people to consume whatever it is that you're selling. That in a policy sense, that may be a policy change. For a business, it may be a product. But the flip of that is, these historical, and we still use it today, the stick, is we punish people. And we know that, speeding fines and parking tickets, we know these things don't work because we know that the human condition or human behavior, we don't always pay attention to these rules and these regulations. And we're seeing it now with conflict in the Middle East and the blockage of the Straits of Hormuz in relation to the fuel excise being sliced by the government, because the argument was always there. demand inelastic goods and essentially their vices and their high carbon emission. And what the government wants to do is bring down consumption in that space. But again, you guys you've done your economics, you understand inelasticity, you understand uh, vices and addictions in consumption. So things like cigarettes on taxes on cigarettes and alcohol. Governments like to, governments like to tax them because they know they can maximize their surplus because they're demand inelastic. So we know that there's these huge losses in the way that policies are designed using these two very blunt instruments of incentives, and because they're highly resource heavy. Governments have to employ police, legal frameworks. So what behavioral economics is really taking some of these core theories from applied psychology and understands and developing a better understanding of mechanisms of choice, but keeping these core quantitative concepts, core quantitative methodologies underpinned by these things like scarcity and opportunity cost that we use in economics to have more holistic design of public policy. Let me give you a couple of examples of why we see these sort of violations of the rational man that we talk about in neoclassical economics and how behavioral economics can help. I said before, I'm a Brisbane boy. Here on the left is a picture of my mum's place, and you can see my dear old mum out in the backyard there. In 2011,
Sorry to
we
interrupt, Stephen, but I think we are still on the landing slide.
oh, okay. Um,
Yeah.
I'm at a University of Technology, don't forget.
Oh, aren't we all? Okay. Yep, that looks good. Oh, we can still see the desktop, but it looks to be a blank desktop. We see the PowerPoint window and then the main slide that you're on with the photo on the left and the right. So maybe just working through that window, I
Okay.
guess, might be the right, yeah, the
So
right
does
way to go.
that one rolls over now? No.
Yes. Yep. It's moving around now. We can see your mouse and the slides are changing. Yep.
Okay, cool. Apologies again. Um, so yeah, there's a picture on the left of my mum's place, and the Brisbane floods. And what happened at that time, the policymakers, the meteorologists told everyone in Brisbane, this is a 1 in 100 year flood. And I said to my mum, look, for your own good, for your welfare, you should move places if your place flooded. And she said, no, no, this is only going to happen once in 100 years, and it's already happened. So I won't be around for the next one. And lo and behold, in 2022, and that's when this photo is taken, Brisbane flooded again, and my mum's place got flooded even further. You can see the watermark on the wall there. Almost 3 foot of water went through a place. And that's what's known in behavioral science or behavioral economics is neglect of probability. And we know that human beings are very bad with math. And if you think about it, what my mum did there was say, well, this has already happened to me. I won't, it won't happen again. So when we design policy, we need to think about the ways that we explain basic problems to people to help them to make better choices for themselves. The one on the right, and this is something that, your students that are 15, 16, 17 years old, you've lived this through COVID and the lockdowns that we experienced, and people, an anti-vax movement in relation to the COVID-19 vaccination program. We know vaccinations have done more to save human lives and the human condition across the last 100 years than any other medical change. So it was ridiculous to think that that a vaccination program was in any way. I mean, remember them saying we were hooked up to the 5G network, or you develop autism, or there was a range of these sort of. So again, these sort of policy and social marketing programs really need to understand how to reach their audience and their audience for them to understand the policies that they're in. Again, is that slide moves? Okay, so really quickly, I'll give you the history of behavioral economics in 3 seconds. So this is Herbert Simon, and he was a very famous psychologist, and he used to hang out. He was at Carnegie Mellon and used to hang out with economists, and he loved economics and he loved bringing together the applied psychology. And he's pretty much known as the godfather of behavioral economics. And he was so smart or so brilliant. As a psychologist, he managed to win the Turing Award in computer science and the Nobel Prize in economics. So that tells you a little bit about not just about how smart he was, but about the different concepts he brought from other sciences to improve economics. We fast forward really quickly, and I'll take you to the next Nobel laureate in Daniel Kahneman in behavioral economics in 2002. And I would highly recommend, if you're looking for a book to even read it just about applied economics, this is one of the top two books, Thinking Fast and Slow. And Kahneman really took a lot of what economics was doing in relation to neoclassical foundations and built a behavioral component into it. And that was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then what happened was, slides are still moving, aren't they? Yeah, excellent. Sorry. Government started to listen. And you can see here at the bottom, Barack Obama or President Obama and Cass Sunstein, who's the Harvard law economist, who was a political advisor to him during the Obama administration. Above, you've got Richard Thaler, who recently won the Nobel Prize in Economics. I think it was 3 years ago. And government departments have started to realize that the carrot and the stick are really inefficient and they're really costly. So what we're better off doing as behavioral economists or applied economists is being able to advise governments on how to design better policy where the government doesn't have to spend money and people can make better choices for themselves by understanding the policies and the value for themselves and for society. I have a friend that works at University of Pennsylvania in the US, and she did a study recently and found that there are now more than 800 behavioral economics departments in governments globally. So it is an exploding space to work in. Every government is looking for ways where they don't have to spend money, but they can influence positive behavior. Here in Queensland, we have the Premier's office has a behavioural group that started 3 years ago. The Prime Minister's office has a behavioural group called BETA, the Behavioural Economics Team of Australia, and they've just had their 10th anniversary. So it's a burgeoning space to work in. Really quickly, what's a credence good? Okay, a credence good, this is the space I work in. And it's around how do you know that you're getting a fair deal? How do you understand if someone is not necessarily smarter than you, but has more information? And this is traditionally what's known as a principal agent problem in economics. But working with, I did my PhD with Professor Uwe Dulick, who's now the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Business Government Law at the University of Canberra. He is one of the top three in the world leaders in credence spaces. Let me give you the taxi drivers are a really good example up until when they developed Uber and Google Maps, because I'm obviously in my 40s, but when I was traveling in Europe in my 20s, I'd get off a plane and I'd get into a cab and I'd say, take me to my hotel. And I didn't know whether the cabbie drove me around everywhere and ripped me off or drove me directly to increase the fare or to take me directly to my hotel. And it was a bit of a novelty for economics at the start when the credence research started in the 80s and the 90s. But it's now been expanded out to all principal agent issues or principal agent scenarios where you have an expert, and you think about a GP, a medical GP or a dentist or a clinician who gives you a recommendation. As much as you want to pretend or think that you can have the same level of understanding as that expert, you can't. Not because you don't want to, or not because the clinician or the expert can't articulate it too, but there's a divide there in relation to whether you truly understand that you're getting the most effective or the best outcome for yourself. And these are the spaces I work in: applied health and in education, and also too in agriculture, looking at how we can help experts to inform novice consumers and how novice consumers can maximize their understanding. And this is a really interesting one. I work with some biomaterials tissue engineers at QUT, and they've developed this new breast scaffold technology that will replace silicon saline implants for breast cancer survivors or breast reconstruction. And what the surgeons do and the biomaterials engineers do is that they scan the breast prior to mastectomy, and then they 3D print a polymer scaffold that's clinically and surgically inserted under the breast after the cancer's removed. And what happens is the muscle grows back into the scaffold, and breast cancer patients can regrow their breasts. It's the most incredible technology, and it'll fundamentally change breast cancer recovery for women, which is a massive issue in Australia and globally. 1 in every 7 women will develop breast cancer in their lifetime. So it's something that is hugely impactful. And it's quite humbling for me to get to work in this space with these amazing tissue engineers. And what we did was we did some research with, we asked them, hey, how do surgeons and patients and nurses actually interact with each other? And they said, well, they make the diagnosis and then the patient makes the choice and then they do the surgery. And I said, no, but there's a really complex process there. You have these experts, you have these consumers. And they said, well, we don't know. So I said, okay, well, let's go out into the market and collect some data and study this behavior. And what you can see here is you can see the slide with the red square and the yellow square. Excellent. Yep. We surveyed the surgeons and we surveyed the nurses and we surveyed the patients. And we asked the patients, how long in your first consultation did you spend with the surgeon and with the nurse? And the patient said, on average, they spend about 39.38 minutes. Very large sample, 689. So that's why you get the 0.38. How long did you spend with the nurse? Oh, about 27 minutes. We also asked the surgeon and the nurse, how long did you spend with the patient? And the surgeon says the surgeon spent 45 minutes, and the surgeon says their nurse spends 21 minutes. Now, when we asked the nurse, they actually said the opposite. They said the surgeon spends less time, 30.79, and the nurse says they spend 49 minutes. Do you see there in a credence, from a credence perspective, you have these experts, the surgeons and the nurses, who have a fundamental bias, or what's known as a temporal distortion, in their estimates of how long they engage with the patient. Now, I'm not saying one of the two of them has to be wrong. They both can't be right, okay? But I'd say more likely than not that both of them are wrong. And that their estimates of how long. And what we want to do from a policy perspective is when we're helping, whether it's surgeons and nurses or any market consumer, we want to help them to understand and maximize their choices in this space. And there's a range of ways that we can do this as behavioral economists. I'll skip this one really quickly. And one of the ones I always like to talk with students about is the social aspect or the social impact of behavior and how we can use social norms to craft policy to help people to make better choices. You see it in nature, self-protection in ecologies and environments for animals. It's so prevalent in Australia, we've actually coined a term for it. We call it tall poppy syndrome, in that we don't want people to stick out from the bunch. And the picture on the left there with the young gentleman in their multicolored outfits, high school is one of these most prevalent spaces where conformity and staying in an in-group is so powerful to change behavior. Barnaby's always one of my favorites. Here's Barnaby. Social norms are so powerful for him as a member of, well, he was a member of what's the country party? The Democrat? No, anyway, he's with One Nation now. And look how powerful social norms are for him. He wears a suit when he goes to Parliament because he wants to feel like an in-group when he's around other politicians. But when he's with his constituents, he dresses in a different way. So understanding how people interact is as powerful as understanding how you want them to react. And I use the Barnaby Joyce example, but you see it in heaps of behaviors. You see it in Swifties and the Taylor phenomenon. I always use the example of if your parents say to you, "Oh, if, little Johnny jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too?" And the answer always is yes, yes, you would. We behave in the ways that we see inside the cohorts that we are because they provide our norms, they provide our boundaries and our establishments. And the very famous social psychologist Robert Cialdini, he had this fabulous paper in 1990 in JPSP where he talked about broken window theory and that descriptive norms are far more powerful than injunctive. What does that mean? It means that what I see, I do. What people tell me to do isn't necessarily a motivating factor. So, and that goes back to things like speeding fines and littering. I'll do what I see people do around me. It's very unlikely that I do what I'm told to just by what the government tells me to do. Really quickly, here's the second book I'd recommend, and it's Thaler and Sunstein's Nudge. Talks a lot about different ways for policy design and how to use behavioral interventions for policy. And what I wanted to finish on was, and I'm sure we're going to have a chat, Justin, a little bit about what, in more depth on what I do. I see economics as what economists do, not who they are. And I've been very, very lucky to have great PhD supervisors and master supervisors, and my undergraduate lecturers and tutors were fantastic in that they helped me to develop a skill set that I could take anywhere. And I wanted to show you this list of the diverse groups that I've worked with because they've been interested in, they're the experts in their space. I'm an expert in behavioral economics, and what they're looking for from my role is to help them to understand the human behavior in their spaces. Been really lucky to work with, Treasury, TMR, DJAG. I'm doing a lot with the Premier's office at the moment. So yeah, it's really, really broad, the work I do. Um, and if you'd like to shoot me an email, I can answer any questions, or there's a QR code there. You can scan it and check out ARC Beta. We've got a heap of content on our website about the research projects that we do, and even opportunities once you get into your undergraduate to do summer research or vacation research work with us as well. So that's me.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Stephen. Yeah, uh, really interesting. I've got about 4 pages of notes that I've been taking just myself. Um, yeah, really, really good. I love the recommendations. I've read both of those books. I would say David Kahneman is about as classic as they get as far as economists go.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm glad that his name is especially over the last few years, has become quite famous. And I don't know if popular culture is the right, that might be overstating it a little bit, but
No,
I
no, I
feel
think
like
so.
you
I
see it
definitely
right there on
think
the
that
shelves. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
permeated through business,
Yes.
and it was you had to look to find the book, but I think you can
Yes.
find it at airports now, which tells me
Yeah.
it's part of the popular culture vernacular.
That's
Um,
that's exactly, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. And Richard Thaler, Nudge, is one of my all-time favorites. I think when I was in uni, I'm from Toronto, Canada, and so when I was studying at York University, I think Richard Thaler did a series of guest lectures or something. I
wow,
don't know
yeah,
if he taught there, but I think I remember that I signed up or was put in. I don't know. It might have been like 3 lectures or 4 lectures or something, and it was one of those
yeah,
things where it's just like, oh my goodness. He
yeah,
spoke a lot about, and there's a big piece on in the book about his work or his team's work or someone else's work, I guess, in designing um, the framework around how Americans can choose their health insurance policies.
yeah, yeah,
Because
cool.
their private health coverage is a very different system from Canada and from Australia, and the
Mhm.
difficulties in them choosing adequate health care, and but the economic importance or the government importance of people having good health care. But how do you get them to choose a healthcare coverage, and how do
Yeah,
you get them to choose one that is going to actually be right for them, because you want
yeah,
them to choose a good one,
yeah,
but you don't want to force one on them,
mm,
and all that sort of stuff. So really, really brilliant. I'll start with some with a pretty standard question, I suppose, but it is a really, really good one for the students
mm,
who will be watching. As I sort of alluded to before, a lot of our students, they're going to be amongst the best and brightest. They're probably taking high school economics. They're probably excelling in it. They're probably also really good readers and are doing well in English and literature. They're probably have chem and maths, and they're probably doing well in those as well. So they
yeah,
have the unfortunate luxury of they can
of
study
choice.
of choice. It can be engineering, it could be med, it could be law, it could be economics, and they even love learning. They love
Yeah,
learning. So So if you to tell them, well, just do what you're interested in, they
Yeah.
might even say, I'm interested in everything.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so with that level of nuance, and I guess those very, my style of making this question hard for you, for those type of students,
Yeah.
what is it about economics, or particularly behavioral economics, that should, and since you're a Queenslander,
Yeah.
how might they know that, okay, I might have med somewhere, or engineering, or law, if we're a little bit closer to the same, or commerce, or whatever. Why might behavioral economics or economics be their first preference? Like, how would they know that that's the one that they should put first because it's something inside of them? Like, why should they pick that over the other ones? Or
Yeah.
not why it's better. How might they know that they're the type of person who should pursue economics?
First of all, I think that anybody who enjoys learning and trying new things, the adventure um, of higher education, you're going to succeed. And picking
Mm,
economics, I mean, I could sell it to you,
mm,
but at the end of the day, I think the most important thing, and I say this to whenever I go out to high schools, I say, do the thing that you're most passionate about. Don't do what mum and dad did, or don't do what your friends are doing. I've done some research in education and in relation to how students choose the courses or the locations that they go to. And they are usually where mum and dad went, the university that is geographically closest to them, whatever their rankings allow them to get into, and then their friends, where their friends are going. So that's usually the top four. But I would
mm,
say to people, and I say it to my first year undergraduates, because in the business degree that I teach, they haven't picked their major yet. They've just picked
mhm,
business. And this is sort of um, a little bit, you're asking me, well, what faculty? Am I going to do science? Am I going to do economics? And I think the universities allow people to do double degrees. And I'm assuming that if you've got a lot of high performing students, that choosing a double degree, I think, is a very smart option. Well, it's a smart option, but it's the best option, because you do get to try both. And I think that a lot of, and I've taught at the university for almost 14 years now. I think there's a big misconception in high school that you need to know exactly what you want to do 40 years from now. Okay. And that you don't. Okay. You just need to know that you want to pursue a particular space, and choosing a double degree allows you to do that. And we'll just say hypothetically, you want to do a double degree of engineering and economics. So at the institution I'm at, you would enroll in a business degree and an engineering degree. And then you would do your first, or it's usually a 4 year, 4.5 year degree. And that goes all the way up. Some people do law and economics, that's a 5.5 year degree. Your first year in those double degrees there's no specialization whatsoever. You're doing completely introductory courses. So I don't think you should put pressure on yourself to know, oh, I
mm,
want to be a macroeconomist that just looks at foreign trade. That's way too specific. You just need to
mm,
know that you like economics, and you just need to know that you like engineering, or you just need to know that you like aeronautical physics, whatever that broad space. And once you get into it, what I find is I was heavily, heavily influenced by my lecturers and the people I was doing. I'd got a research assistant position in my second year, and I started going to reading groups and being immersed in the things that I was passionate about. And what I always say to people in year 11, 12 is that university, yes, it is tertiary education, and it's the next chronological step from secondary, but it's so different. It's so
mm.
different because high school asks you to be good at everything. Well, not everything, but
Yeah.
seven or eight, six, seven, eight different fields. But once you get to uni, if you don't like English, or you don't like math or something, you can pick courses where you don't have to do any of that, and you can highly specialize. So learning, I think for me anyway, learning became even more exciting when I got to university, because I got to get rid of the things that I wasn't necessarily invested in and just focus on the stuff that I really enjoyed. So, I've talked all around your point because I don't want to say,
Mm,
that economics this is the reason why you should pick
yeah.
economics. I think you should be confident in the things that you value and that you want to do. And I'll give one final example before I let you ask another question. My son graduated in 2017 from high school. And all through high school, he wanted to do aeronautical physics. That was why I brought it up. He went to the US. He was part of a Australian rocketry thing and he went to Cape Canaveral and he saw rockets and everything. And he was doing all of the natural sciences. And then he got to year 12 and completely changed his mind and said, I'm not really passionate about this anymore. What I'm really interested in is online gaming and communications and journalism. And he just did a full right angle overnight. And and but what he did then when he went to university, he just aced it. He was at every class, he was engaged in everything, he was doing all these groups, and now he's found this wonderful career. And I won't say he works for a multinational. He also works for on the side for a first-person shooter commercial gaming company.
Huh?
And he's having a blinder, and he's living his dream. And there is nothing more motivating than following your passion. What's the old
Mm,
saying about do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it tells me a lot that if you guys are turning up here on a Saturday night, that you're interested in some form of quantitative social science. Justin, you said you
Mm.
had data science on before and applied mathematics, and now you've got me as an applied economist. It's telling me that you guys are going in the right direction if you're going to choose some form of applied quantitative social sciences. So I would recommend going with your gut, and putting yourself in a space where you can learn for that first and second year when you go into university about what you want to specialize in.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I would wholeheartedly agree. If anything, if there's something that I tell students is to sort of relax about what their preferences are. That your
Absolutely. Yeah.
first preference might just be your first preference, and after
Yeah.
6 months, you might just decide, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I've decided.
Yep.
I've had like whenever I'm lucky enough to sort of catch up with alumni students, one question that I always ask them is how many of their friends have changed their degrees.
Yeah.
With it, and the number is never none. It's there's
No.
always quite a few.
Yeah.
And it's especially funny when my former students have said, "Sir, they did a degree, they started a degree in economics," and then I'll get a message or an email, and they'll say, "Sir, hope you're not upset, but I changed. I'm not doing it anymore." And I say,
No.
no, I definitely don't take it personal. And if anything, I'm proud of you because you took economics, I'm confident that you made the right choice, that like you
Yeah,
realized at the
I
right time.
100% agree.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
Yeah.
And all that. Yeah, exactly. Let's sort of fast forward a little bit from, the high school student to now let's talk about either a late university undergrad or graduate, or even an early professional, whether that is yourself
Mhm.
or students you have mentored or anything like that,
Yep.
or your own experience with Department of Transport or anything like that.
Mhm.
Would you be able to describe? I know it's going to be a pretty broad brush and depend on the industry and the company and everything.
Mhm.
But so someone who would identify as as a behavioral economist, they
Yep.
now work for the Department of Made Roads. They now work in this industry or that industry. Would you be able to sort of describe what kind of day-to-day work they're doing? Are they
Yeah.
interviewing stakeholders? Are they
Yeah.
reading reports? Are they
Yeah.
surveying? Are they working a lot in Excel and
Yeah.
calculating things like that? What sort of grind day-to-day work at the office or at home would have you experienced, or young professionals you still work with or mentor? What kind of
Yep.
day-to-day work,
Yeah,
what does that
absolutely.
look like?
So we place a lot of grads straight obviously out of their undergraduate in because we work with them on what's known as the Vacation Research Experience Scholarship through QUT, or we also train them as research assistants. And the high performing ones, or these are the ones that I see a lot of, in second and third year are coming to our research group and saying, "Hey, I'm interested in not just doing the theoretical that I'm doing in my course. I actually want to apply some and develop some of those skills and be part of the research projects that you're doing. Those students are very, very successful at finding, summer graduate internships at, your KPMGs, your Deloittes, your big commercial firms. But they're the first ones that walk into positions. Like I said, the Queensland Department of Premier and Cabinet, they have a graduate intake as well. We've just placed a couple there. Um, so that's sort of some of the pathways. In relation to what they would do on a day-to-day basis, they do a range of things, and it would depend on whether they're commercial or they're policy. But essentially, they would have good interpersonal skills or some level of interpersonal skills because they would deal with, senior leadership or give advice to senior leadership in whatever department they worked in, or if they worked in commercial analytics, they would have they would definitely have some statistical skills and some sort of software package skill development, things like Stata and R. When I went through PhD, it was much tougher because you didn't have the AI to help you. But AI now allows you to really interact with the software to develop research much faster, and I wouldn't say necessarily easier, because the foundations for a lot of that stuff is the theoretical that you learn in your undergraduate. So you need to understand the complexity of how the statistics work in relation to what it is you're trying to analyze. But yeah, you would go through the process of any sort of bespoke research that you would do. You may do some sort of cost benefit analysis if you're working in government or for a commercial firm that has a tender to analyze, what are the outcomes of, and this is hypothetical, sewage going into the barrier reef. There's an environmental economics analysis that you could do. And there may be some kind of ethical processes that you need approvals for. You would go through that process. You would write some kind of pro forma on what you're going to develop and how you're going to do it. You would go out to the field. You may capture data yourself. You may be involved with whoever it is that collects data, maybe pre-existing panel or longitudinal data that you work with. You may be the individual regression monkey that does the hardcore quant stuff yourself. For some people, and let me talk about that distribution of, because we talked before about, some people don't like the math, is that some people really like sitting behind the desk and just crushing Stata and R with and just running regressions. And I have PhD students who are like this. They don't want to get out from behind the desk. They love that aspect of it. But then I have other students that are exceptional and or have different skill sets in relation to how they talk about policy and economics and how that impacts the consumer. And I think that it's important to have both. You need to be able to understand the statistics and do the analysis, but then that also allows you to inform you on how you interact with the consumer or your senior leadership on whatever it is, that deliverable that you produce every day. So that sort of lends into the rest of the day. And I was talking about where you would develop reports. You would probably do a presentation for, and this is across, not average every day, but you do a range of these things. And yeah, you would produce, reports or things that inform policy, and you would advise senior leaders in the commercial space or in for state government or whoever you're working for. The wonderful thing about being an academic, but I've also found too is, and maybe it is because I am an academic and that's the way that industry and policy talk to me, but I always find I have wonderful conversations, really, really in-depth, wonderful conversations with people who are interested in behavioral science. And I think that, all of the students that come through the space that I work in, and it's not just me, talking about Gigi, who's at UNSW. I know a lot of her students who have gone on to work in this space, in different spaces from this field, is that it's very intellectually stimulating. It's really exciting for me to work. But again, maybe that's my bias and maybe that's just my passion on what I get to do. So yeah, there's a range of things that you would do. And these projects, you get to travel, you work in different offices. I think one of the most advantageous aspects of having behavioral economics or applied social science, quantitative applied social sciences skill set is you can go anywhere. You can go to London, you can go to Bangkok, you can go to Launceston or Dubbo. The skills that you're taking, you can just pick them up and take them with you, and businesses, they're always looking for how can we understand human behavior, whether that's internally in their business, how they interact with the consumer, how they interact with the regulators in their space, governments, other businesses. So it's not just your day to day is interesting. The work that you're doing is very interesting every time that you do it. And every time I'm forced to learn something completely new, which to me is very exciting.
Really, really. You spoke a lot about a range of sort of fields and topics and research and things like that. Is there anything that's, I guess, that we could describe as very, very current or emerging? Maybe something that your undergrads or your graduate students that you worked with, that there isn't a lot on it yet, but you could see it becoming like that. You're excited to see what the research looks like once it's done. Is there something that perhaps isn't very well known, even in the field, that you're like, oh, this is a current problem or a current question that's being asked, and I can't wait to find out what the answers or what the follow-up questions might be? Is there something extra current in your field that you've come across or stumbled upon or read?
I think economics um, sort of struggles a bit with innovation in
Mm,
that and creativity. Creativity is probably the
yes.
better word than innovation, in that economics for the last 100 years has very much been moving towards a mathematic principle in that was it Nobel called economics the dismal science?
Yeah.
Is that economists always felt like they were the little brother to natural science, and that has lent itself to the overly use of mathematical formulation in relation to how we explain behavior. But for me, and this is very much, I'm hugely influenced by Professor Benno Torgler, who is the director of the research center, and he was my PhD supervisor, and I think is one of the most creative and innovative behavioral scientists in the world. He's a world expert in tax morale, so understanding how humans interact with regulations around taxation. And taxation is the oldest mechanism of behavior. Basically every war has started around pretty much around taxation. And everything has changed because of taxation. But what I think is super interesting about Benno is that somewhere along the line he was looking at tax and he said, look, the tools that I have can't explain in economics, can't explain what I see. And he did very much what Herbert Simon did and went out and looked at other fields and brought other sciences, lenses, and perspectives in, which gave a more holistic understanding of the work that he was doing. And I think that he's a huge believer in creativity in science. And that, if we can't be creative in science, how do we move? How do we
Mm,
go anywhere? And we're seeing that a little bit now in this sort of AI revolution, or is it an AI revolution? I don't know. But there's definitely an appetite now for wherever you go or whoever you talk to, oh, is AI going to take over? No, that's just another creative evolution of the humans and how we interact with science. We go back, 100 years, it was the wheel or flight or, it's rocketry or all of these sorts of things. It's always, for me, what's interesting is understanding how humans interact with their own creativity, their own innovation, the technology that they
mm,
use, the technology adoption. I used the COVID-19 example before. We had this wonderful technology that saved lives, but we had people who couldn't understand that it was in their own best interest.
mm,
So for me, I think that, and I'm not. an economic purist. As you can probably tell from what
Mm,
I'm talking, I love economics because it gives you this incredible foundation, these core
mm,
principles to look and see. But I think that for me, the most interesting space is how economics will deal with creativity moving forward.
mm,
If we are splintering off into these other, sentient AI language models, all of these, getting away from um, what is creativity, I think that even just makes the question even more interesting.
excellent, excellent. I think we have time for one more question, um, and I think that's going. Your comments there is going to be a good segue to what usually is our final question. Um, my experience with young people and teenagers over, I think I've been a teacher for about 17, 16 years, give or take.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of, especially older generations, sort of kind of see teenagers, the classic teenager might be a little bit cynical or apathetic or whatever. I've always disagreed with that, but let's just kind of go with this as an example. Um, and perhaps especially in modern times with the challenges around media and geopolitics and things like that, for young people, and I think there is a little bit of data that suggests that current young people are a little bit less optimistic than generations before them, whether it's housing affordability
Mm.
or generational inequality or climate or whatever it might be. And so, and especially yourself, professional, and just as a parent, um, reasons for optimism that young people should have, that the world that they are going into as adults, that, you know, things that they should be excited about and looking forward to, that it's not all doom and gloom, that they'll be inheriting and look and leading a world that is good. Is there
Yeah.
any advice in that regard? Here are some things that the 20-year-old should feel good about going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, well, let me start with the misery first. For 20-year-olds, I realize COVID was really bad for you guys and
Yeah.
stuff, but I mean, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and there was the real threat of nuclear holocaust.
Mm,
And the generation before me grew up, essentially the boomers had World War II, and there's always going to be some tragedy in life. That's what makes life beautiful. I'm sorry.
mm,
But in my experience, the greatest part of my job and the thing that I love more than anything is the energy that I get from my
mm,
undergrads and from my masters and my PhD students who are in that 18 to 32 bracket. And it is so wonderful to I have this incredible job where every day I get to go to work and I get to interact with these kids, and they're not kids, they're adults, but they're so motivated, and they want to get there, and they want to talk about this book that they read, or the concepts that we were talking about in class, or the research that we're doing. And for me, the it's not the wisdom of youth, it's the energy of youth. And that pessimism can be a motivator. But it's I don't think that I think that there's so many opportunities from the energy of and the experience of these new students coming through. I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned. There's always going to be something on the next horizon. AI is going to take our jobs. No, it's not. A fourth industrial revolution or whatever they are calling it now, that's just technological change. That's just technological adoption. We know that this has been happening throughout human history. It may be scary in some parts, but the unknown is always scary. And you guys who are listening to this, the students, you are going to be that next generation that the generation after you will complain about, probably just in the way that so you have this wonderful opportunity to go out and follow your dreams and get excited every day because to be really honest with you, I really didn't like high school. I really struggled at high school for a range of different reasons, academically and socially. But it was because I wasn't enjoying what I was doing, and I wasn't passionate about anything. Tertiary education is
mm,
the most liberating space You know,
Yeah.
Justin's nodding along as well. You
Mm.
can't really know how wonderful it is until you get there. So my big advice, and probably this is good to end on, is have an open mind. Get into something, have an open mind, go along and be someone that attends stuff. Whether it's your classes, your social groups, be someone that's there and that's present, and great things will happen. You'll be surrounded by people that are passionate as well. And yeah, all of a sudden, before you know it, you'll be finished your undergraduate course and you'll be knocking on my door for master's or PhD. So yeah, be interesting.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much, Stephen. Really, really, really enjoyed it. And it is good to
Cool.
have a local Brisbane, even though I probably don't sound like a local, but I am. Um,
Okay.
very, very, yeah, excellent, excellent. Yeah, such great advice, such great stories and insights, a lot throughout your journey, and a bit of a breakdown as as far as what behavioral economics is and what they do and all of that sort of stuff, which I think I would imagine that the typical high school student, unless they happen to go to a school that where they can take psychology, perhaps, um, but the average economic student might not know of the field. So I think this is
Yeah,
you probably switched on some light bulbs in a lot of young person's
excellent.
mind. So we'll say adieu for now. Thank you so much again, Stephen. For everybody else, stay online just for just a little while longer while we field some questions about the AEO. Okay, Stephen,
Thanks,
thanks very
guys.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
All right. My name's Ray. I'm the co-organizer of the Australian Economics Olympiad. So I'm here today to not only just record a fantastic interview, but also like answer any of your questions about the first round exam. So feel free to type your questions into the chat, and yeah, I'll try my best to answer. All right, while we're waiting for some prudential, waiting for some questions, I'll do a very brief, I guess, we talk about it. You, Justin, you know that we talk about this every single year, right? So about the first round exam, if you will do it for the first time next Saturday morning, I think the most important thing is just to relax and apply your economics knowledge. So what we are trying to do, because like USW is the question maker, right? So no high school students are actually involved in this question making process. So what we are trying to do is trying to make the exam what we call curriculum free. So no matter what curriculum you study, or you don't study economy, you're just watching some like crash course on YouTube, or like read the core economics. So like they are the same. That doesn't really matter. So like where and how you learn economics is, but more important, because we won't ask you to write any kind of like a definition. There's no questions like that, right? So there are 40 multiple choice questions where you are required to like use your economic sense, or like some like your intuition even, to answer some of the questions, right? And then we will have 3 or 4 actually open questions. So again, like it will be like give you like more leeway to use your economics knowledge again to explain, to analyze some economics news. And then there are like 3 mandatory questions and 1 bonus question. So that's the actual 5 points coming from the bonus question. One thing I do want to, remind you is that your teachers should remind you that is that for the open questions, we strictly mention that we only consider the first 350 words you're gonna write. So don't overspend any words, overspend your energy on any of the questions. Trying to spread your energy across 3, or the including bonus question, that would be 4 open question, and try your best. Yes. So there's no trick that like sometimes we got a student ask that, oh, whether there's any like thing I need to revise, or any book we need to read. I don't think it will be obviously if you have like economics exam coming up at your school, it will be good for you to do some revision. If you're in year 12, it will be a good opportunity for you to actually take the exam to see how you go about your like economics knowledge. But I don't think there's anything in particular you need to work on to prepare for the first round exam. So after first round exam, so we'll have like about 10 days, like full markers will be like very busy marking all the answers, and then we will notify your teachers about in about 10 days to see whether there's any student, whether any of you getting to the second round. The second round gonna be team-based present economic case study, policy case study, what we call. So we'll that will be talking about like, so we'll top 40 performers in the first round exam will be randomly assigned into 8 groups. So each group have 5 students. They're gonna work together to do like a presentation on economic policy. So that will be a policy case study. That's for the second round. Yes. So, and then we'll, based on the first round and second round performance, we'll select the 5 national winners. So that's basically how everything works. So if you're curious about, I guess there's no question today. I guess I explained it out perfect well, or, oh, there's one question here, I guess. But, if you have any question, I think the best thing for you to do actually go on the website, our official website, aeo.org.au. There's an information sheet there, so you can read to understand a little bit better. Yeah. You don't know an answer to. I don't think there's any question about knowing the name of people, or like, especially in open question, we definitely won't ask that, oh, yeah, who are mention a theory. I will gonna ask you or force you to use any economic theory to answer to analyze any of the economic issues, right? There we won't do something like that, ask you to like basically write down the definition or anything. I guess if you approach a question you don't really know the answer to, I guess, like I said, trying to use your common sense, economic common sense, right? So like trying to how like explain to the markers, what do you think? If you don't know the answer to the question, but what's your instinct? Based on the economics you have studied, economic knowledge you have studied, what's your first reaction to it? Or you can say that, oh, you can even be very honest, saying that, oh, I don't really know. I guess I don't really know like, any sophisticated or advanced theory, but I will say that, the approach should be, so just explain your thoughts. I think that will be very helpful because the markets will know that you're all high school students. Obviously, if you know like your economic curriculum inside out, that'll be great. But if you think like, oh, there's some question you don't really feel very comfortable, I think, just to write down your instinct. Yeah. Yeah, because we're Australian Economics Olympiad. I do think like Australian economic, we mentioned that information sheet as well, where we do try to focus a little bit more on, we're trying to cover how do you use like knowledge on economics, Australian economics issues and fairs. But I do remember that, in previous years, I do like remember there might be some question about global economy as well. So there's nothing like there's no really scope, but the open questions are designed to test your ability to apply your knowledge. So yeah. Anything you wanna add on, Justin, as an economics
Uh,
teacher?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it quite well. I
Yeah.
would say that, yeah, for questions that you don't know the answer to, and perhaps, maybe if to the people who are asking these questions, maybe you're locked into the high school way of doing things, and you're thinking of marking criteria and what is the thing that the teacher wants me to say, or what is the thing that HSE or VCE, marker wants me to say. Try not to approach the questions that way. Use your economic logic, and the fundamentals. The costs and benefits, the scarcity, the decision making, and just try to use your economic common sense or your economic logic, as opposed to trying to think of like, here's a specific theory that I will just try to force into the answer of this question. We call them open-ended questions or open questions as opposed to anything else, because the markers, I believe, which I'm not one of, the
Yeah.
markers, I believe, really want to see your reasoning and your economic sophisticated thoughts and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, there does tend to be like a little bit of a, I suppose if there was a, you know, a slight advantage, it might be like they do kind of expect it, like if you are sort of somewhat up to date with current economic news and events and current events, um, you know, that does tend to help a little bit. Like these will be realistic, like, you know, economics and you know kind of what's going on. Now that doesn't mean that you all need to go and read the budget from last week or anything like that, but you know, as a simple example, my students said that, you know, a few years ago there was a question or two about COVID, you know,
Yeah.
so kind of current event type stuff.
Yeah, I don't think that's any kind of like, because like if you are, because like I guess the whole AEO is trying to testing, trying to finding the students who are most passionate about economics, obviously knowledgeable about economics. So if you're passionate about economics, you should read the news anyway, right? So that's
Mm,
what you're gonna do as a top economics student. You sort of
mm,
like have to read news, right?
mm.
So yes, hope all the answers are helpful. And again, if you have any questions, so like go to our official website. But due to so we don't really release a lot of. There's no past paper. There's nothing like that. So trying to have fun, relax and enjoying the question, enjoying a process of like applying your economics beyond just your classroom curriculum tests, right? It's a extra curricular learning opportunity. So yeah. So I think we'll call it for the day. And thanks Justin again for the
You're
interview.
right.
And everybody have enjoy the rest of your weekend.